call came just after midnight. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, the caller ID showing Hannah Freeman, my aunt, Eleanor's eldest daughter. I knew instantly it wasn't good news. Grandma Eleanor had been fading for months, but the finality of a late-night call always hits different. "She's in hospice, Hope." Hannah's voice was clipped, devoid of the usual warmth she reserved for her important friends. "Doctor says it's hours, maybe a day. You're the executor, by the way. Figured since you're 32 and don't have anything else big on your plate, you could handle it." I just nodded into the phone, even though she couldn't see me. 32 years of being the family's invisible, reliable backup plan. I got to the hospital before dawn. The waiting room was already packed with my relatives, all looking like they'd just rolled out of bed, which they probably had. My mother, Yolanda, was fussing with her hair, while my father, Alex, sat silently beside her, scrolling on his phone. My older cousin, Annika, was already on a call, whispering about estate matters, and my younger brother, Nicholas, was laughing too loudly at something Raulin, another cousin, showed him on her phone. No one even looked up when I walked in. I found a quiet corner near the window. Eventually, Hannah spotted me. "Ah, Hope. Good, you're here. We were just discussing the funeral arrangements. I think a spring theme. Very, Eleanor, don't you agree?" She didn't wait for an answer, turning back to Annika. "And the will, of course. We'll need to make sure everything is handled efficiently." They talked around me, not to me, for hours. It was like I was a piece of furniture. Then Hannah pulled out a thick envelope. "Oh, and this. Grandma insisted it was for you, Hope. To be opened after I'm gone," she said. Such a quirky thing. She handed it over with a dismissive wave, a faint smirk on Annika's face. Later that day, when they finally let us in, Grandma was barely conscious. Her eyes fluttered open when I leaned close. Her hand, frail and papery, found mine. "Hope," she whispered, her voice a dry rustle. "Don't let them take what's not theirs. If you must, let the truth do its work." She was gone by morning. The funeral was a blur. After everyone left, the house felt eerily quiet. I sat at Grandma's old writing desk, the sealed letter heavy in my hand. My name, Hope Freeman, was written on it in her elegant, familiar script. I tore open the seal. My eyes scanned the first few lines, then the next. My face went pale. The letter wasn't long, but every word hit me like a physical blow. Grandma Eleanor, in her precise, elegant script, had laid out her final wishes, and they were nothing like what anyone expected. First, she confirmed I was the sole executor of her estate, with full discretion over her affairs. Then came the part that made my hands tremble, a series of clues, a riddle almost, leading to a hidden account. "If they treat you as invisible in death as they have in life," the letter read, "then the sum within is yours to steward. But it comes with a condition, Hope. A truth long buried must finally see the light." The days following the funeral were a blur of family demands. Hannah, my aunt, had me running errands for floral arrangements, picking up dry cleaning, and even coordinating catering for the post-funeral reception. "Hope, dear, can you just handle this? You're so good at organizing," she'd say, never once offering to help, always with that subtle tone that implied I had nothing better to do. My mother, Yolanda, asked me to sort through Grandma's clothes for donations, then critiqued my choices. Annika, Raylin, and Nicholas were too busy discussing their own travel plans and what they expected from the will to even notice I was doing all the actual work. It was exactly as Grandma had predicted. I spent my evenings, after everyone had left Grandma's house, meticulously following the clues in the letter. A specific passage in her favorite poetry book, a date etched into an old locket, a series of numbers hidden in a recipe. It felt like a treasure hunt, and it led me to an online banking portal. The balance flashed on the screen, $218,000. My breath hitched. The instructions were clear. If the family continued their pattern of neglect, the money was mine to use, but only if I fulfilled her second, stranger wish to reveal a family secret. The weight of it settled on me. This wasn't just about money, it was about something much deeper. I thought about all the times they'd made me feel like a ghost. My 25th birthday, forgotten by everyone except Grandma, who'd baked me a small cake. The holidays, where I was always on dish duty while my cousins laughed in the living room. The way they'd openly mocked me when my dad, Alex, was laid off years ago, calling me the poor one behind my back. They'd always seen me as a convenient, quiet utility. A week after the funeral, I sent out a group text. Just confirming everyone's travel arrangements home. I've booked your flights. I didn't ask if they needed help or if they wanted to stay longer. I simply informed them. For the first time, I wasn't arranging their comfort. I was arranging their departure. It felt like a tiny, significant victory. The subtle rejection of arranging only their flights home, not their comfort, seemed to go unnoticed at first. But as the days stretched into a week, then two, after the funeral, the family's impatience about Grandma's will began to boil over. My phone became a hot potato of demanding emails and frantic calls. "Hope, darling, have you seen Eleanor's will yet?" My mother, Yolanda, sounded like she was trying to be casual, but her voice was tight. "Just wondering when we can expect things to be settled." Hannah was less subtle. "Hope, this is ridiculous. It's been weeks. What exactly are you doing with Grandma's estate? You're not holding anything up, are you?" Annika, my eldest cousin, chimed in with a thinly veiled threat. "You know, Hope, handling an estate is a complex legal matter. There are professionals for this. We wouldn't want any misunderstandings, especially with someone who might not be entirely stable under pressure." I could almost hear her exchanging knowing glances with Hannah. They were already discussing challenging my control, hinting I wasn't up to the task. I ignored most of their calls, focusing instead on sorting through the mountains of Grandma Eleanor's possessions. It was a slow, methodical process, each item a memory. Tucked away in a dusty box in the attic, beneath old photo albums and dried flowers, I found it, a small, leather-bound diary. It wasn't a typical journal, it was more like a chronicle, detailing events from decades ago, written in Grandma's familiar hand. As I read, a knot tightened in my stomach. The diary chronicled a family-ruining event, a hidden shame involving a property dispute, and a financial scheme that had somehow ruined Eleanor's younger sister, my great-aunt, decades ago. The entries hinted at a cover-up, implicating not just my mother, Yolanda, but also Hannah. The gravity of what Grandma wanted revealed sank in. This wasn't just about spending the money. It was about exposing a truth that had been buried for too long, a truth that had caused Eleanor deep, lasting pain. The next day I picked up my phone. My finger hovered over a contact I hadn't called in years. Jacqueline Stevens, Eleanor's old friend, almost like a second grandmother to me. She'd always been kind, always seen me. "Jacqueline," I said, my voice barely a whisper, "I need to talk to you. You deserve to know before anyone else." Jacqueline and I met at a quiet cafe, the kind of place Grandma Eleanor would have loved. She looked frail, but her eyes, sharp and knowing, held a deep sadness. I laid out the diary, explaining what I'd found. Jacqueline listened, her expression growing graver with each word. "Oh, Hope," she finally said, her voice heavy with sorrow. "Eleanor told me bits and pieces over the years. She always wanted the truth to come out, but she was too kind, too afraid of tearing the family apart. But it tore her apart, living with that secret." She then confirmed everything. The property deeds, the old news clippings, Jacqueline had kept them. She pulled out a worn envelope from her purse. Inside were documents detailing a fraudulent land deal from nearly 40 years ago. Eleanor's younger sister, Clara, had been swindled out of her inheritance, a small but valuable piece of land, by a shady developer. My mother, Yolanda, and Aunt Hannah, then in their late teens and early 20s, had been complicit, signing documents that effectively cut Clara out, all to secure a larger, more profitable deal for the family's burgeoning real estate ventures. The news clipping showed a small local story about the scandal, quickly buried. Clara, heartbroken and financially ruined, had left town and never returned. Eleanor had carried the guilt and the secret ever since. While Jacqueline was confirming the past, I knew Beckett Williamson, Hannah's husband and a legal professional, was quietly doing his own digging. He'd already consulted an estate attorney. I'd heard through the family grapevine about my suspicious handling of Grandma's money. They were circling, ready to pounce. Back home, I prepared certified letters. One for my mother, Yolanda, one for my father, Alex, one for Hannah and Beckett, one for Annika, one for Nicholas, one for Raylan. Each letter was identical, brief, and to the point. Expect a public announcement regarding Eleanor Freeman's estate and family matters in 48 hours. Sitting there, the letters fanned out on the table, a wave of doubt washed over me. Was this justice or just revenge? Was I doing this for Grandma or for the quiet, overlooked girl I'd always been? The line felt blurry, almost indistinguishable. The satisfaction I felt was mixed with a chilling dread. I sent the letters. Then I made another call, this time to a local newspaper. The headline, I knew, was already being prepared, embargoed for 2 days. My name would be attached as the source. The 48 hours felt like an eternity. I spent them meticulously executing Eleanor's wishes for the $218,000. My first call was to a local women's shelter. $100,000 was donated in the name of Clara Freeman, Eleanor's wronged sister. Next, $50,000 went to fund a local journalism scholarship, also in Clara's name, a nod to the truth Eleanor wanted revealed. The remaining $68,000 was allocated to a legal trust advocating for elderly abuse victims named after both Eleanor and Clara. Every penny, a deliberate act of defiance and remembrance. The local news exclusive hit the stands and the internet like a bomb. Family Fortune used to expose decades-old fraud. Cover up! The headline screamed, accompanied by a photo of Eleanor and a smaller inset of the old news clipping Jacqueline had given me. The story detailed the land fraud, Clara's ruin, and the complicity of Yolanda and Hannah. It spun the narrative of Eleanor's final act, her hidden will, and my role as executor. My phone started ringing before I'd even finished my first cup of coffee. Annika's name flashed on the screen, followed by a barrage of furious texts. What the hell, Hope? Are you insane? And you just gave away our money. We'll sue you into oblivion. Raylan, usually so outwardly sweet, sent a string of expletives, accusing me of ruining her family's reputation and, by extension, her social media career. Nicholas, my younger brother, called, his voice laced with a desperate kind of anger. Hope, what have you done? Mom is hysterical. This is crazy. You're destroying everything. He tried to guilt-trip me, reminding me of family loyalty, of how much they'd supposedly done for me. I just listened, a quiet satisfaction building inside me. They were finally seeing me, even if it was through a lens of pure fury. Within hours, the inevitable happened. A certified letter arrived, this one addressed to me. It was from Beckett Williamson's firm. The family had filed a lawsuit challenging Eleanor's will and my actions as executor, demanding the return of the funds. The stakes had officially escalated. And then the social media backlash began, not just against me, but against my entire family, their names now synonymous with fraud and greed. The first wave of karma had landed. The lawsuit, combined with the local news story, went viral. It wasn't just a local scandal anymore, it was a national sensation. Family Feud over Hidden Fortune exposes decades-old fraud screamed headlines across various online news outlets. The media coverage stoked public scrutiny into my family's carefully curated legacy, dissecting every detail of the land fraud and the subsequent cover-up. Their names, once synonymous with quiet success, were now dragged through the mud. My phone, which had been ringing off the hook with family fury, now started buzzing with interview requests from major news networks. I ignored them all. Instead, I called Jacqueline. You're better at this than I am, I told her. Can you issue a statement for me?" She understood immediately. A single poised statement was released, confirming the authenticity of all documents and Eleanor's clear intent. It was enough to keep the story alive without me having to face the cameras just yet. I thought back to the last summer I spent with Grandma Eleanor, just a few months before she went into hospice. We'd been sitting on her porch swing, sipping iced tea. She talked about Clara, her voice thick with sorrow. "It broke her, Hope," she'd said, her gaze distant. "And it broke a part of me, watching them do it, knowing I couldn't stop it. They were so young, so ambitious. They didn't see the damage they were doing. They still don't." That summer she'd confided in me, not just about the fraud, but about the decades of emotional manipulation, the way my mother and Hannah always put appearances and ambition above everything else. She'd wanted to protect Clara, but she'd been too afraid of the family's wrath. Now she was using me to finish what she couldn't. Meanwhile, Beckett, Hannah's husband, was scrambling. I heard through the grapevine that he'd initially been confident the will was easily challengeable. But Eleanor, with Jacqueline's quiet help, had made sure it was legally airtight. He was desperately looking for a loophole, any crack in the foundation, but all he was uncovering were more family skeletons, threatening his own professional reputation. The more he dug, the more dirt he found, not on me, but on the very people he was trying to defend. Then a new kind of message arrived, an anonymous email, short and chilling. "Be careful, Hope. Everyone has dirty laundry. Yours is about to be aired." The anonymous warning didn't deter me. In fact, it solidified my resolve. A major news network had been persistent, and after consulting with Jacqueline, I agreed to a live interview. It was time. I walked onto the set, the bright lights blinding, the cameras feeling like 1,000 eyes. My family, desperate and cornered, had attempted a last-minute plea. They'd issued a joint statement, publicly denying everything, claiming I was unstable and manipulating Eleanor's final wishes. "Hope, your family claims these allegations are baseless," the interviewer began, her voice calm but probing. "They say you're fabricating a story for attention." I looked directly into the camera. "For 32 years, I've been the invisible one in my family, the convenient helper, the one whose opinions didn't matter, whose birthday was forgotten. My grandmother, Eleanor, saw me. She knew the truth of what happened decades ago, the fraud that financially ruined her sister Clara, and the cover-up my mother Yolanda and Aunt Hannah were complicit in. I calmly recounted the decades of marginalization, the way they'd dismissed me, the way they'd exploited my willingness to help. I held up the certified copies of the property deeds, the old news clippings, and excerpts from Eleanor's diary. "These aren't fabrications," I stated, my voice steady. "These are receipts. These are facts." My family's gaslighting attempts were crumbling on live television. The community, watching, began to rally behind me, their comments flooding social media. Then came the final blow. "My grandmother also knew they would try to discredit me," I continued, pulling out my phone. "So she gave me a way to ensure the truth would be undeniable." I played recordings I'd found among Eleanor's meticulous files, private conversations, secretly taped by her over the years, of my relatives discussing the original cover-up, their dismissive remarks about Clara, and more recently, their plotting to challenge the will and steal the inheritance I was meant to steward. Annika's condescending voice, Hannah's controlling tone, Nicholas's casual greed, all laid bare. The studio was silent. The interviewer looked stunned. The family's social and professional reputations imploded in real time. I later heard Beckett was under immense pressure to resign from his firm. I was both hero and pariah, but for the first time, I felt truly seen. The aftermath of the interview was swift and brutal. The lawsuits against me, once a threat, fizzled out as Beckett's firm, facing its own PR nightmare and internal investigations, dropped them. Beckett himself resigned, his reputation in tatters. Hannah and Annika faced professional repercussions. Clients pulled out, partnerships dissolved. Raylan's social media empire crumbled under the weight of public disgust, her carefully curated image shattered. Nicholas, unable to leverage his charm, found himself isolated. The family, once so tightly bound by their shared secrets and ambition, was scattered, their ties severed by the very truth they had tried to bury. My mother, Yolanda, tried to call. Then she showed up at my apartment unannounced, looking haggard. "Hope," she started, her voice thin. I'm sorry for everything. This has just been so hard on us." She didn't apologize for the fraud or for making me invisible. She apologized for her suffering. I looked at her, truly saw her for the first time, and knew there was nothing left to say. "Mom," I said, my voice calm, "there's nothing to be sorry for. You made your choices. I made mine." She left, and I didn't hear from her again. A quiet satisfaction settled over me, but it wasn't happiness. Revenge, I realized, wasn't a joyful emotion. It was a cold, methodical act. But it had given me a voice. It had validated Eleanor's pain, and in doing so, it had validated mine. Eleanor's letter had one final instruction: use the rest to tell our story truly. With the remaining funds from the hidden account, I funded a memoir. It wasn't just my story. It was Eleanor's, Clara's, and the family's true history, laid bare for anyone to read. Jacqueline visited me a few weeks later. We sat on my small balcony, sipping tea. "You did good, Hope," she said, her hand resting on mine. "Eleanor would be so proud. You broke the cycle of silence. That's a powerful thing." I visited Eleanor's grave. The headstone was simple, just her name and dates. I pulled out the original letter, now worn and creased. I read the final lines aloud, my voice catching on the words,